Tech Talk.
Welcome to Security in Focus Tech Talk, a regular podcast focused on informing and supporting the needs of Gallagher Command Center installer technicians, administrators, and operators.
Welcome to the Security in Focus Tech Talk podcast. I'm Steve Bell, Chief Technology Officer at Gallagher Security, and I'll be highlighting the latest product features, version releases, and product troubleshooting with our technical experts within the industry. This Tech Talk series has been created to support our technicians out in the field installing Gallagher solutions to ensure their customers are getting an awesome experience and value from their command center system. The topic for this first episode of Tech Talk is the Command Center version 8.70 release. My special guest for this episode is Mike Margrain. Mike is National Technical Manager for Australia and has an excellent product knowledge and experience. Mike, can you please tell us about your background with Gallagher?
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here. Yes, I'm Mike. I'm our National Technical Manager for Australia. I'm based in Brisbane. Been with the company for a little over 14 years now. Originally, I was our Technical Account Manager for Queensland and Papua New Guinea. And in the last 5 or so years, I've now been in a national role supporting our in-market teams around the country and our channel and end users at a national level.
Cool. And, I've got to say that you're probably one of our more experienced people around and work very closely with our R&D teams. The topic for this podcast is our version 8.70 release. The first one we'd like to talk about is controller upgrades. I've talked to Stephen Quinn, who's our tech lead on the integration squad for Command Center, and he told me about the feature.
When we started the project, this started out as a fairly simple request to say, can we increase the number of controllers in a bulk change from 20 to 50?
Stephen then quoted one of our tech leads.
What strikes me is that our current process for upgrading controllers is clunky and not well suited to large sites. Why don't we redesign the whole process and create a new user interface for updating the controller software used for all controllers? And we decided to knock it out of the park.
So Stephen went on to describe the user interface and how it all works.
So the new UI presents a list of controllers, and we have a tab that shows the HBus devices attached to the controller and an events tab which shows the events related to the controllers and their devices. The contents of these two tabs depends on which controllers you have selected. So that means you can see what you want to see. It's in your control. One of the other aspects of the whole upgrade process is that as our customer sites grow in size, there is a large number of controllers. And we're going to introduce a single door controller, which is only going to make it even more controllers. So we built in a filtering mechanism so that you can limit what you see to what you want to see. There's various different filters around by name, division, description, what controllers have which software on them, and which controllers don't have a particular version of software. So you can actually look at things that is relevant to the task at hand.
Stephen has had the chance to go to one of our sites that is testing the new feature and got some good feedback.
The feedback we've got so far is that all of our research and talking to our customers in terms of what are their pain points, we might well have answered everyone's pain points. And if we can produce a feature that answers all of those pain points, I think people are going to love this.
So Mike, you know a lot about this feature and you've worked very close with the guys in market. What do you think the impact is for our technical guys out there and also for the customers?
Yeah, I think they're all going to love what we've done here. We've actually been putting quite a lot of effort recently into improving the deployment experience of Command Center, and that goes from making it easier to install Command Center, the server itself, the workstation software, but also upgrade the system. That includes workstations, it includes the server, and upgrade includes updating controller software. What we have found is that prior to this new work in version 8.70, the controller upgrade process really was quite cumbersome for technicians and sometimes for end users who might do that themselves.
So what are the key areas where the technical guys out in the field can actually improve this upgrade process?
So one of the things we looked at before this project started was how do you identify which controllers need to be upgraded? We had a way in the past to find controllers on a particular version, but there was no way of finding controllers that were not on a version. Stephen alluded to that before. So part of this tool now is it has a new user experience to upgrade large amounts of controllers at a time. There are no longer restrictions, but one of the really neat things in it is that it allows you to actually track the upgrade process while you're doing it. So you can find controllers on a particular version, but in particular now you can say find me controllers that are not on this new version, the one you actually want to move the site to. So you no longer have a difficult process to find the ones that you might have missed. This tool will actually very easily allow you to see which ones have I not upgraded, and it gives you live stats too. When you open the tool, it will tell you how many controllers are yet to be upgraded, how many have been upgraded, and how many upgrades are actually in progress right now.
So, Mike, what is the best practice for upgrading a command center site with, say, 200 controllers?
When firmware is applied to the controller, it involves a controller restart. So that does involve an outage for the controller of typically 1 to 2 minutes. So for different sites, that will mean different things. Sometimes sites will send out messaging to say that there is going to be a momentary disruption. Other sites might require people to be at the door to prepare for that. So those differences will impact how somebody applies the firmware upgrades. That may mean that a site will do them in small batches, or it might mean that a site might push out all the firmware upgrades at a very quiet time, which might be, in the evening. This tool actually does allow you to set up upgrade scheduling too. So you can find batches of controllers. It has filtering in it so that you can use system division, which is our partitioning of Command Center, to say find me all the controllers in this division, which might represent a building, and schedule them to automatically upgrade at 8 o'clock tonight. And you can do different batch scheduling for different types of controllers based on a division or even a name filter. So if the controllers are named with common prefixes that represent something like a building, you can use those name filters to find those groups of controllers too.
Right, so it's really easy if you want to go and say I want to upgrade building 1 tonight at 8 o'clock, and if I then want building 2 to happen tonight at 10 o'clock, then I can have the security guard go from building 1 to building 2 and be ready for when the upgrade happens, when people may or may not be able to get through doors.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When the workstation updates have been deployed, it's quite common for techs to upgrade a controller that's close to them, or maybe a few controllers that are close to them, to prove the update process, give them a level of confidence that it happens quickly and happen without issue. And then once they've been done and once that comfort is there, then they'll start pushing out larger groups of controllers and setting up that kind of scheduling.
Right, and once there's total confidence with this whole process, it could be something that if they don't need to worry about having security guards at the door, they could just schedule a time in the evening and push the button, go home and come back in the morning and check it. Is that the ultimate?
And actually, one of our Command Center Insider sites that updated to version 8.70 a couple of weeks ago did exactly that. They have just under 500 controllers. It used to take them several hours to manage the controller upgrades, and from 8.70 with this new tool, it took them less than 2 minutes to apply the scheduling for all their controllers. They were scheduled to happen at 8:30 that night before the administrator went home. She went home. The controllers ran. She didn't get any phone calls that night, turned up for work the next morning, opened the upgrade tool, and it showed all controllers had been updated, ran some reports to check, and everything happened smoothly. The controllers were all back in just over a minute, and there was no more manual checking that needed to occur because the tool was able to actually validate, yes, they all are now on the new version. So what came from several hours prior to 8.70 ended up happening end to end in less than 5 minutes.
Cool, and so this is going to make the life of the technician and the administrators way simpler and save a whole lot of time.
Absolutely. Improving the controller upgrades, particularly on a large site, has in the past caused hesitance. Maybe some sites have been slower to upgrade because that part of the process was a bit slow and arduous. And by making it easier for the technicians managing the upgrades, spending less time doing it and bringing that comfort level to the end users, hopefully more sites upgrade and stay more recent with Command Center.
It would be great if we could make it easier for all our sites to stay up to date, because we regularly are putting out security improvements for the product, and it just seems a pity if sites don't upgrade to get all those latest security improvements and therefore keep their sites as secure as possible. So if we can make all this process so much easier for them, then hopefully we'll get a whole lot more customers keeping up to date.
Yeah, that's definitely the dream. What improvements we can make to remove those impediments to upgrade so that they happen more frequently. Sometimes things like customizations, custom firmware, things like our CustCard DLLs that allow us to read third-party cards. They get loaded into controllers, and those types of added complexities can also be cause for less frequent upgrades. And this tool actually does cater to those too, that within the upgrade tool, if it's found that controllers are running controller customizations for enhanced, non-out-of-the-box functionality, or has CustCard DLLs loaded into it to read those obscure third-party cards, the upgrade tool can actually automatically remove the old and apply the new CustCards and customizations in addition to the firmware as part of that whole upgrade step. So that's all seamless for those sites too.
Mike, the next feature we're going to talk about is the Halo Smart Sensor. I've asked Zaya, who is the value owner for the team that developed the integration, to give us an overview.
Halo is an IoT-based smart sensor that detects and responds to gunshots, chemicals, vape, THC, aggression, and many more detections. It's a highly advanced tool that is intended to keep people safe from a wide variety of factors. The device is primarily used in verticals such as commercial, education, and healthcare. So for example, in the education vertical, it can be used to monitor air quality to ensure that the air quality is conducive to learning. It can also help schools tackle the vape epidemic amongst youth by monitoring areas that are commonly used for vaping and therefore discourage it. Another example would be in relation to the increasing number of school shootings that are happening. Halo identifies gunshots, and when integrated with Command Center, a facility administrator can initiate a building lockdown protocol from Command Center.
Halo is definitely the most capable environmental sensor we have seen. Mike, can you tell us some more about the integration and what our users can do with it?
Zaya described the overview of those Halo sensors really well. The great thing about this integration is that every individual Halo sensor appears as a device in Command Center. When they raise alarms through the integration, it's the sensor itself that generates the alarm. We have 22 new event types for every one of those different alarms that they can generate. So when Zaya talked about maybe a carbon monoxide alarm or a vaping alert or a THC alert, all of those types of alerts come through individually, and that means that an operator running an activity report in Command Center can not only run reports to identify alarms that came from specific sensors, but they can also run reports that identify alarms from those sensors for very specific reasons. The other thing then too is that because they're raising normal alarms in Command Center, we can do all the normal things that we would do with an action plan against an alarm. So we can set the alarm priority, we can determine whether or not it's audible or not for Command Center operators. We could put alarm instructions in place to give those operators the instructions on how to deal with that specific kind of alarm. And we can do all the normal things with notifications. So for a particular kind of alarm, if that needed to be sent to specific guards or operators, we can send those via email, SMS, or push notification for our Mobile Connect users.
So the Halo integration is one that integrates through our controller API, Mike, and maybe you could give a bit more of an overview of how it all fits together.
Yes, essentially everything is TCP/IP. Each Halo unit is an IP device. We have a middleware service that can run on our Command Center server or some other middleware machine. And the Halo sensors proactively in real time push those alarms and alarm restorals to our middleware service, which then generates the alarms through a controller. So this is very similar to other controller API integrations that we've developed. The middleware service is effectively federating those alarms, and the controller is what generates them, very similar to something like a video integration.
So Halo actually pushes the events to us in real time, Mike. Is that the case?
Yes, that's right. The Halo sensors push those alarms to our middleware service in real time. We run a web service on that middleware. So the communication from the Halo unit to our service is encrypted over TLS. It's a web HTTPS packet. And they not only generate the alarms through that active push, but those alarms are stateful. So if a sensor has detected a particular kind of alarm, that alarm will be active until the Halo sensor has generated a restoral for that alarm. So in Command Center, you'll see the red bell. The alarm will unable to be processed by an operator until such time that the alarm itself has cleared, and that also comes through in real time from the Halo sensor.
Mike, it's probably worthwhile explaining how we've managed the security between the Halo to our middleware to Command Center?
Yeah, sure. Each one of those sensors has a username and password that's used for authentication with the integration. We would recommend that each unit has its own username and password, but it can be made common if required. The authentication that happens through that web API between each sensor and our middleware service is encrypted over TLS, so that username and password can't be sniffed by looking at that network traffic. It does mean that the username and password should be adequately secured.
So they type the username and password into the Halo when they're configuring that, and then we have that username and password stored securely in our database. Licensing wise, Mike, is this one of our normal licenses where we have a cost or a license per item?
Yes, that's right. There's a per device license cost in a similar way to how we license doors. Gallagher is not selling these Halo units at this stage on our third-party price list, but there are a number of distributors in different regions all around the world where they can be purchased from.
So Mike, moving on to some of the smaller things in the version, from time to time we add new Microsoft operating systems, sometimes we take some out. So what's the change in this version?
Yes, this time round in version 8.70 we've added support for Microsoft Windows Server 2022. Often the reason why Command Center system upgrades are being done and Command Center Care Plan providing eligibility for Command Center upgrades is often pushed through by end user IT departments, and cybersecurity improvement is often the catalyst for those upgrades. So staying current with Windows Server is a big part of that.
Yeah, I've got to agree. The more our customers can keep up to date with everything, the easier it is for them to keep the site secure. Okay, and moving on, we've got updates to a couple of our third-party reader integrations. The first is our MorphoWave reader, and the change here is that the full MorphoWave fingerprint templates can now be encoded onto the cards. Previously, templates had only had a couple of fingerprints on it.
Being able to store the fingerprint templates on the card helps with those that have privacy concerns. It means that it's the user themselves carrying around their own templates, that they're not being stored centrally. But in particular, this enhancement to store more fingerprints on the card really makes the solution more robust. If the reader was only reading a single fingerprint plus a duress fingerprint, if that particular normal fingerprint had some grit or dirt on it, or the finger was cut perhaps, or had a band-aid on it, this reader would not be able to read you. And now being able to store multiple fingerprints really adds resilience to it, because the reader will be able to read one of many fingerprints.
We've got some updates to SALTO. Would you like to tell us about those, Mike?
Yes, in this version we've updated our support for the SALTO Space software to version 6.4.4. So this is the server software that integrates to Command Center to support the SALTO wireless and offline locking solution. The main reason for this update to 6.4.4 supports SALTO's new encoder. So this is the device that requires network connectivity to the server when we're encoding cards. And the reason for that is the old encoder that's been supported for many years had IP addressing restrictions on it that only allowed you to configure its IP address. You couldn't configure a subnet mask or a gateway. It presumed that the encoder was on the same subnet with the same gateway as the SALTO server application. And what we've seen in market is a growing trend towards Command Center and the SALTO application being hosted in commercial cloud environments, basically in data centers where it's not possible to take a physical encoder and plug that on the network. So where there was a need to have the SALTO encoder on the network but in a separate physical location to the server, the previous SALTO Space version didn't support that. So this version of SALTO Space from Command Center 8.70 has a new encoder device. It has a new part number to be used when purchasing this new encoder, and it allows you to configure that device on a separate subnet with a different gateway so that it can communicate to SALTO and Command Center. It also supports transport layer encryption, so it's much more secure comms than it was in the past.
We've got some enhancements to our site plans feature. Mike, can you just give us an overview?
Yes, we've added a couple of really nice user experience features to Command Center site plans. The first one allows you to now set a background color in the site plan panel to match the background color of your site plan images. So what we had in the past when displaying a site plan within a viewer or within a tile in Command Center, you may have had a background image set, and the area around the image itself, if it didn't fill the screen, was a static grey color. Now you're able to actually set the color to match that image to provide a much better look and feel to the site plans when operators are zooming in and out of the site plan and managing items on that site plan. Further to what we've done with the site plan background colors, we've also made an enhancement in this version around the zooming capability of site plans. So operators familiar with Command Center site plans will know that we support both zooming in and out and panning around our site plans. That also includes zooming with the click wheel on a mouse. And in the past, it was possible and probably even frequent where when an operator was zooming out from a site plan, Command Center allowed you to zoom too far. You could end up with this very small background image with all of your site plan items tiny on the screen, and there was no real reason why an operator should be able to zoom that far. You end up with what we called the letterbox effect, with the site plan image very, very small within the viewer and a big background image around it, but it really wasn't usable. So in 8.70 we've now changed that behavior where when you zoom out, it will only let you zoom out to a point where only one site plan background image edge is touching the viewer edge. So it will zoom to a point and then stop, because anything past that would effectively become unusable with that letterbox effect. So there's no configuration required for this. It's effectively just a sensible restriction on zooming out too far.
Cool. So yeah, we've got a new enhancement to our alarms functionality where you can prevent the muting of unacknowledged alarms. Mike, why would we want to do that?
This has primarily come about from control room scenarios where guards managing the system should have alarms be very audible when they go off. And in the past, when an alarm went off in Command Center, if it was configured to be audible, which we can set per priority, an operator was able to click to mute those alarms or to press F9 on the keyboard to mute those alarms without having actioned them. And system administrators who want to ensure that operators were actually following the process and appropriately dealing with the alarms quickly really didn't want operators to shunt the audio from them whilst they were still active and not following through their due process. So this feature allows the administrator to configure operators so that certain operators are unable to mute the alarms. So if they've decided that something should be audible, to force the operator to deal with it quickly, they can't be muted from our software. A key point to note there is that they could still mute the alarms in the Windows operating system unless that has also been disabled. So we've created the ability to prevent the muting from Command Center for certain operators, but if there's a need to prevent the ability from muting the volume from Windows itself, that should be set up with Windows group policy, basically from the Windows domain.
For more than 20 years, Gallagher Security has been providing solutions to government high security standards and specifications for perimeter detection, intruder alarms and access control across New Zealand, Australia, USA and the UK. Most of the technology developed for these government standards is baked into the Gallagher platform and is available to all our Command Center customers. CP&I, the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure, is a UK government entity that manages the specifications and standards for physical security in the UK. We have recently gained compliance for the CAPS 2021 standard. CAPS stands for Cyber Assurance for Physical Security Systems. We previously had compliance to CAPS 2015, but there are several improvements included in CAPS 2021 that we believe should be standard practice and have been included in Command Center version 8.70 release for all our customers. They relate to the management of accounts and passwords and increase the overall cybersecurity of Command Center. The first change that our high security team have made is to force any active operator session to be immediately logged out when the password has been changed or the account has been disabled. That probably doesn't need any more explanation. The second feature is improvements to allowable passwords an operator can use. We already have some extensive password rules that define what are allowable passwords in relation to length and required characters, and we have a list of weak passwords that users cannot select. This addition allows more flexibility to define password patterns that are not allowed. Mike's going to give us some more details.
Yeah, I think one of the key points to add here is that high security, particularly in the Five Eyes Alliance nations, is one of our top strategic goals, and we aim to make the most secure products on the planet. We bake that into the wider Command Center product, and these are a really good example of that, Steve, where some of the improved policies around operator passwords and handling with account disablement and password changes is something that we're seeing be requirements for all Command Center systems. In tender environments on new sites, we're seeing quite specific requirements come up more and more around password policies. We've had in the system for several years now a default list of the top 100,000 weak passwords that gets enforced to prevent weak passwords being used in the system, and that is an editable list. The new enhancement allows users to actually add wildcards, so being able to take that a step further to have more disallowed passwords with wildcard matching is a really good value add, because it's quite well known that one of the most easiest ways to breach a system is simply through a very weak password.
The third change relates to the use of the system account. The system account in Command Center is intended to be used to get the initial system installed and establish the appropriate operator groups and system divisions. The best practice is that the system account password would be changed at this point, and the password kept in a secure location only to be used when something absolutely requires it. After those basic system entities are established, every installer, administrator, or operator should have their own logon so that all changes that any person makes are attributed to the correct person. So the change that we've made in 8.70 will create a persistent alarm in Command Center whenever somebody is logged in using a system account. Mike, can you please fill in the details?
Yeah, sure. The system account in Command Center is akin to the administrator user in Windows. It effectively has full system rights in the system, and it's probably not uncommon for channel partner technicians to make use of that system account when accessing customer Command Center systems. From version 8.70, every time somebody logs into Command Center with that system account, an active alarm is going to appear in the alarm stack whilst they are logged in. What that means is that customers may ask you about that. Some customers might find that really useful. It would give them visibility of the fact that you or anybody else are in the system with those full admin rights. Other customers may find that undesirable and may prefer you to utilize your own operator logon, which really is what we recommend. So the recommendation from us, and this is documented in our hardening guides, is to actually disable the system account. That password really should be in a password vault, ideally with the customer, and operators should be using their own credentials to log into Command Center. And so just really be aware of the fact that from 8.70, if you don't do that, a new alarm that perhaps yourself and the end users themselves haven't seen before will appear in the system while you're logged in with it.
Mike, we've got an event sync utility in this version, and we also have multi-server out there. So what's the difference between these two features, and where might use the event sync utility?
Yeah, I'll start with a little overview of multi-server, Steve. Multi-server's been in the product as a Command Center feature since version 6.01, going back to 2009, I believe, and it's designed for an organization who has multiple sites that typically span a large geographical area where there might be poor or unreliable comms between those sites. And what it provides is the ability to retain site autonomy when site-to-site communication goes down. The systems in a multi-server environment operate like individual systems in their own right, but they synchronize data in the background so that if comms is lost, everything on that local site with its local server continues to operate. So operators have a window into the system to monitor the system. They can do system overrides and run reports, view cardholder location, and manage cardholders. With multi-server though, it synchronizes lots of data. It synchronizes all the cardholder information to all servers. That includes personal data field information, which could be personally identifiable information, that PII data, that can be privacy concerns, and then you're subject to operator privileges within Command Center as to what you can do. But really it is designed for each of those systems to be owned by the same organization. If there is a scenario, though, where there is a want to synchronize data between disparate command center systems that are not owned by the same organization, we now have two synchronization tools that are purpose-built to synchronize some limited data to reduce dual data entry and improve centralized reporting. So just firstly, perhaps before touching on event sync, I'll mention the cardholder sync utility, which we've had for several years now, and that allows a site to synchronize cardholders from one command center system and push them into another system. Cardholder sync allows you to choose which cardholders get synchronized, to choose which fields, to choose which cards, and even mobile credentials can be synchronized. And commonly it's used in multi-tenanted, office tower scenarios where there might be tenancy systems that are all unique in the system, and also a base building system where people actually come to their place of work on the base build system that might have car park entry booms. It could have speed styles that people get to, particularly at ground level, and then an elevator system that's interfaced where they badge into their place of work. So the cardholder sync actually allows the tenants to configure users in their own system and have them automatically sync into the base build system, so that those users and perhaps that common base building access that all of those tenant cardholders require don't need to be created and managed manually as a secondary step in the base build system. So we've had that for quite some time, and in 8.70 that we're talking about today, we've now added a new event sync utility, and this one it works the same way as the cardholder sync. It's a service that sits on a machine, could be one of the two command center systems or even some middleware system, and in a fully authenticated and encrypted manner it synchronizes events from one command center system into another. And the way that works is that there's a source and a destination system. In the example of a multi-tenanted office building, the base build system may have car park entry gates, speed styles, and elevator terminals, and the tenant command center system may want to have the events from the base build system doors appear in the tenant system. And the reason for that use case is because commonly in a tower environment like that, it's quite often where people can badge into the base building, go through speed styles, go up through an elevator and reach their place of work at their desk, and work all day without actually having badged their card or their mobile credential at a reader, and therefore the tenant system didn't actually have those events. So this tool allows the two systems to securely synchronize certain events relating to just those tenant users from the base build system and synchronize them into that destination tenancy system, whereby they end up with events relating to doors representing the base building doors on the tenancy system, and they then get cardholder location updates that can be used for evacuation, for emergency management, and they can run reports on those pseudo doors just like they would on their own system doors for centralized reporting for cardholder movements across multiple sites.
Right, so that would be a good health and safety improvement for those situations where they're going through multiple readers before they get into the actual tenancy.
Yeah, very much so. Otherwise, the only way to get that location data, say an emergency, would be to actually manually reconcile data across two systems, which, in a scenario like that is really not practical. It's a very flexible solution. You can configure which doors you synchronize that data from. We've added a new REST API privilege for this solution to support the ability of cardholder movement events that only relate to a certain division being synchronized across. So the tenancy system should only be able to pull and synchronize those events from those base building doors for their own people, not for someone who belongs to some other division in the base build system. So we've added that extra layer of filtering that supports that restriction. But it's not just movement events that it supports. You can configure the types of events and even alarms in the system. So when those events come across, you can choose whether or not they're events or alarms. You can, bring across even things like building management alarms, or we've had use cases from other customers who want things like duress buttons that have been hit at the base building to actually appear as duress alarms in the tenancy system, and it supports that kind of filtering as well.
Okay, and it's quite straightforward for the owner of the base building to have multiple versions of these connections to feed to multiple different tenants?
Yes, absolutely. The neat thing about both of these sync tools is that because they use the REST API to connect to each respective system, and REST API clients and Command Center are provisioned with access through operator groups that have operator privileges, each system on both sides fully controls what the service can view and what it can control. So So even if the base build system was not the one hosting this tool, they still fully control in their own system what the tool can actually read and write. And you do that through system division and operator privileges. If you have one instance of the tool, you can set up mappings for multiple systems, so you don't need multiple installations of the service on multiple machines. And you could have a combination where maybe if multiple tenancies running Command Center were using this, they might have the service installed on their end, but maybe for other tenancies it might be running on the base build. So yeah, there's no restriction on who hosts it, and it can certainly be set up for multiple pairs of synchronization, each with their own mappings, each with their own API operator and privileges enforcing those restrictions.
So there's a command center on the base build, a command center in the tenancy. What's the best way of connecting those together?
In the past, the way to do that would be for direct networking. You would have the tenancy system would be connected via Ethernet to the base build system server somehow. That would commonly be locally on the network. You might have two networks bridged, perhaps with different network interfaces, or perhaps it might be implemented through some VPN or security appliances that would be provisioned by perhaps both organizations. Depending on the organization and their concerns around cybersecurity, sometimes configuring that and provisioning it and having all the conversations with the right people can be a challenging process. From version 8.60 late last year, we introduced the Cloud API Gateway. Now, this is effectively us providing a free security appliance in the cloud where the Command Center systems connect outbound only to our cloud infrastructure. It's fully authenticated and highly encrypted, and they can tick a box in Command Center against an API client to say allow connections through the Cloud API Gateway, and then integrations using our API connect to the cloud rather than directly to Command Center, and that outbound only established connection will securely tunnel those integrations back into Command Center. So what that means is that you don't need to punch firewall holes and have complex conversations with IT departments, or perhaps setting up things like VPNs and complex routing. Through the Command Center's connection to the cloud, we can securely tunnel that data back in, and it's actually the same connection that Command Center uses to issue our Mobile Connect credentials for Event Sync and for Cardholder Sync. Rather than connecting the systems directly, you can actually have both servers connected to our cloud infrastructure, and the cloud will actually securely tunnel the data, so they don't need any direct comms between them.
That's one of the most exciting things we did in version 8.60, getting some of that infrastructure done to make connecting systems together way simpler, whether it's connecting multiple Command Center systems or having things like third-party visitor management systems connected in the Command Center. That cloud gateway is awesome.
It's really easy to configure. The other probably point to make in talking about this is we have very well documented technical information papers about how we implement this. We're very transparent with our approach to cryptography and encryption, and the implementation that we've done with the API gateway is a good example of that because it's very well documented, and typically all of those cybersecurity questions are answered just by reading that document, and it becomes really easy to implement these solutions.
Thanks, Mike, for being my guest on this Command Center 8.70 release podcast. I think our technical community will get a lot of value from it, and hopefully there will be plenty of ideas in there to help make our customers' systems more powerful, including integrations and automations. I'm sure we'll get Mike back on Tech Talk soon. Now, before I finish, I want to do a promotion to get you to update your email subscriptions. And of course, if you have not subscribed for updates previously, please seriously consider doing so. Just open the page at security.gallagher.com/subscribe. Enter your email address and hit submit, and then look in your inbox for an email with a personalized link to a list of email options. If you do not get an email in a reasonable time, check out your junk or other folders where your email system might file potentially unwanted stuff. If that happens, be sure to mark our Gallagher email address as an email you want to receive. When you open the email, hit the button and it will take you to a page showing a list of 6 options. The last one is unsubscribe if you do not want to receive any emails from us at all. But hey, I'm sure that's not the case for you. In the next podcast of the Tech Talk series, I will have a chat to Shane Keesum and Matt Dean of our technical support team. Our worldwide tech support team provide a 24/7 support service at the end of a telephone or on a keyboard to answer emails. Shane and Matt will give you some insights on how to get the most out of your calls and emails.